6 years ago, my life completely fell apart inside a small apartment in Memphis, a place where I once believed family love would never change. My name is Meredith Foster. Now 25, a woman who has learned how to stand back up after the most painful fall of her life. Back then, I was just a young dreamer, but everything shattered the moment my parents decided to kick me out of the house to please my sister simply because she couldn't stand the sight of my face. "You're making her uncomfortable every day," they said coldly as they handed me a suitcase, and my sister's words still echo in my mind. "I don't want her here." Those words felt like a knife cutting through everything I believed about family. I left with nothing but a few clothes and a burning determination to prove they were wrong for abandoning me. Time passed and everything changed. Today, I live in Portland, Oregon, and I'm the owner of a $7.5 million mansion, the result of years of hard work, sleepless nights, and relentless determination. But then, out of nowhere, my parents called. Not to apologize, not to make amends. No, they wanted something from me. They heard about the mansion, and suddenly I was worth their attention again. In every word they spoke, my sister's presence still lingered, her jealousy and selfishness still pulling the strings like before. Now they say they're coming to Portland hoping to get a piece of what I built with my own hands. But what they don't realize is that I am no longer the weak girl they once threw away. Before we continue, comment below with the time and place you're watching this from. I truly want to see how far my story has reached. Growing up in Memphis, our family seemed tight-knit to outsiders, but inside our modest apartment, I always lived in my sister's shadow. In my early 20s, I watched her shine, her sharp wit and striking looks won everyone over from neighbors to teachers. She was the one who could do no wrong while I scrambled to keep up my efforts barely noticed. I didn't mind at first. I looked up to her hoping one day we'd be equals. Then everything changed. My sister, in her mid-20s, rushed into a marriage that crumbled in less than 5 months. She came back to our parents' place, her suitcase slamming the floor like a declaration of defeat. The air in our home shifted. She wasn't the same person who left for her honeymoon with stars in her eyes. Instead, she snapped at me over the smallest things, my dishes in the sink, my laugh during dinner, even the way I walked through the living room. "You're always in the way," she'd say, her voice sharp enough to cut. I brushed it off thinking she just needed time to heal. But Tracy, that's what I started calling her after her return, didn't stop. She'd corner my dad and mom at the kitchen table whispering complaints about how my presence made the house feel tense. I'd overhear her voice low and insistent painting me as the problem. One night she pointed at me during dinner and said, "Why does she have to be here all the time?" My stomach dropped. I looked to my dad and mom for support, but their silence stung worse than her words. They nodded along, their eyes avoiding mine as if I'd become invisible. It wasn't just one moment. Tracy's attacks grew relentless. She'd roll her eyes when I spoke, dismiss my ideas, and mock my attempts to contribute to family discussions. Once, I suggested we plan a weekend outing to ease the tension. Tracy scoffed. "Nobody wants your plans." My dad muttered something about keeping the peace while my mom busied herself with dishes, pretending not to hear. I felt like a guest in my own home, my voice shrinking with every jab. Their favoritism was suffocating. My dad would praise Tracy's old high school trophies, dusting them off like relics, while my recent college grades went unnoticed. My mom would spend hours listening to Tracy vent about her ex-husband, but when I tried to share my day, she'd cut me off with, "Not now." I started eating meals alone in my room, hoping to avoid the crossfire. Snorts, but Tracy's complaints followed me. "She's always sulking." She told them one evening loud enough for me to hear through the thin walls. I clenched my fists, wondering why they couldn't see how she twisted everything. I tried to keep the family together. I'd offer to help with chores, stay quiet during arguments, even bite my tongue when Tracy snapped at me in front of guests. But nothing worked. The distance between us grew like a crack in the foundation of our home. I'd lie awake at night replaying her words, feeling the weight of their indifference. I didn't know it then, but those moments were building to something bigger, something that would change my life forever. When I was in my early 20s, my world turned upside down. I'd been working late nights on a tech app idea, a scheduling tool for small businesses that I poured my heart into. Excited, snorts, I shared it with my family one evening at dinner, hoping for feedback. I laid out my sketches explaining how it could streamline bookings and payments. My dad nodded vaguely. My mom smiled, but Tracy just leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her eyes narrowing. I didn't think much of it then, assuming she was just in another one of her moods. Snorts days later, I stumbled across a post in an online business group. My app idea, the exact features, the same workflow was being pitched as someone else's creation. The poster, Tracy, she'd taken my notes, my words, and claimed them as her own, boasting about her innovative project to strangers on the internet. My blood boiled. I confronted her that night in the living room, holding my phone up with the evidence. "This is mine, Tracy," I said, my voice shaking. "You stole it. Stop this now." She didn't even blink. "You're just jealous." She snapped, her lips curling into a smirk. "You've always been jealous of me." I stood there stunned, waiting for my dad or mom to say something. They didn't. My mom looked away, fussing with a napkin, while my dad muttered, "Let's not make a scene." Tracy didn't stop there. She escalated, turning every conversation into a chance to tear me down. "Her presence is dragging us all down," she told my parents one evening, her voice loud enough to carry through the apartment. "I can't stand seeing her face every day. It makes me uncomfortable." I tried to defend myself, explaining how I'd worked for months on that app, how it was my dream. But Tracy cut me off, rolling her eyes. "Nobody cares about your little project," she said. My parents sat silently, their faces blank as if I hadn't spoken. I felt my chest tighten, the weight of their dismissal crushing me. It got worse. Tracy started pushing for me to leave. One night, she cornered my dad and mom in the kitchen, her voice low but sharp. "She's causing too much tension," she said. "If she stays, I can't handle it." I overheard from the hallway, my heart pounding. I waited for my parents to push back, to tell her she was being unfair. Instead, my mom sighed and said, "We just want peace." My dad nodded, avoiding my gaze when I stepped into the room. I pleaded with them, my voice breaking. "This is my home too," I said. "Why are you letting her do this?" Tracy smirked again, folding her arms like she'd already won. The final blow came a week later. My dad called me into the living room, his tone flat. "Snorts, you need to leave," he said, handing me a suitcase. "It's for the best." My mom stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the floor. "We can't keep fighting like this," she added. Tracy stood in the corner watching, her expression smug. They gave me no choice. No discussion, just a few bags for my clothes and a deadline to be out by morning. I begged them to reconsider, my voice cracking as I asked why they believed her over me. They didn't answer. The silence was louder than any words. I packed what I could, my hands shaking as I stuffed shirts and notebooks into bags. The app idea, my months of work, felt like ashes now stolen and twisted by Tracy. As I walked out the door, I turned back one last time, hoping for a flicker of regret in their eyes. There was none. Betrayal burned through me, but so did a spark of defiance. I wasn't going to let them break me. I'd show them what I was capable of, no matter how long it took. With just a backpack, I left Memphis and never looked back. Those first days were a blur of pain and uncertainty. I landed at my best friend Heather Gray's apartment in Memphis, crashing on her couch with my few belongings. Heather Snorts sat with me through sleepless nights, listening as I poured out my hurt over my family's betrayal. "You're stronger than this," she told me, her voice steady. "They don't get to define you." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back from despair. She helped me pack my things and plan my next steps, reminding me I wasn't alone. But I knew I couldn't stay long. Memphis held too many ghosts. A week later, I moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, to live with my uncle Kenneth. He welcomed me like a daughter, opening his home without hesitation. "This is your fresh start," he said, handing me a key to his guest room. His kindness gave me a foundation to rebuild. I enrolled in a community college that fall, diving into computer science with a hunger to prove myself. My first year was grueling, balancing classes, part-time jobs, and the weight of starting over. I spent nights studying code, determined to turn my ideas into something real. Kenneth cheered me on cooking dinner when I was too tired to eat, telling me I had a spark he'd always seen. That first year, I threw myself into my studies. I aced my programming courses, earning praise from professors who saw my drive. I started sketching out a new app, one that built on the idea Tracy had stolen, but made it better, more intuitive, more powerful. It was a scheduling platform for freelancers with features to track payments and client feedback. I worked in the college library until closing my laptop screen glowing with lines of code. By the end of that year, I had a working prototype, rough but promising. Over the next 4 years, I poured everything into that app. I transferred to a university in Chattanooga majoring in information technology. My days were a cycle of classes, coding, and pitching my idea to local entrepreneurs. I faced rejection after rejection. Investors called my app too niche or doubted my experience, but I kept refining it, adding features like automated reminders and secure payment integration. Kenneth was my rock, reading my pitch decks and offering advice. "Keep going," he'd say when I doubted myself. Slowly, my hard work paid off. A small investor took a chance on me in my 3rd year, giving me enough to hire a developer and launch a beta version. Users loved it and word spread. By the 5th year, my app was gaining traction. Freelancers across Tennessee were using it, and I expanded it to handle larger teams. I graduated with honors, but I didn't stop there. I founded a startup, pouring my savings into marketing and hiring a small team. We worked out of a cramped office fueled by coffee and ambition. The app's user base grew to thousands, then tens of thousands. Revenue climbed, and I secured a major investor who saw its potential. By the 6th year, my company was thriving, generating enough to make a bold move. I bought a $7.5 million mansion in Portland, Oregon, a sleek, modern home that felt like a dream. It was proof of everything I'd built from nothing. News of my success didn't stay quiet. My Aunt Cheryl, who'd always been kind but distant, heard about my mansion through a mutual friend in Memphis. She called me one evening, her voice warm with pride. "You did this on your own," she said, marveling. I told her about my journey from those dark days on Heather's couch to the long nights coding in Chattanooga. Cheryl promised to visit, but I could tell she'd share the news with my family. I didn't mind. Let them know what I'd achieved without them. I'd turned my pain into power, and no one could take that away. One quiet morning in Portland, my phone rang with a Memphis number. I froze, staring at the screen. It was my mom. Her voice came through sugary sweet, congratulating me on my success. "We heard about your mansion," she said, her tone almost too warm. $7.5 million, that's incredible." I waited, sensing the catch. Sure enough, she pivoted. "You know, family tradition means we share everything. That house should be for all of us." My jaw tightened. After they'd thrown me out, I took a deep breath and said, "Mom, I built this on my own. You don't get to claim it now." Her pause was heavy. Then she mumbled something about family unity and hung up. I sat there, her words echoing, stirring up old wounds from Memphis. I wasn't surprised when an email from my dad popped up the next day. His words were formal, almost demanding. "We're coming to Portland," he wrote. "We need to discuss this in person. It's only right." I read it twice, my pulse racing. Discuss? They hadn't spoken to me in years, not since they handed me a suitcase and told me to leave. Now they wanted a piece of my life because I'd made something of myself. The audacity burned. I wanted to ignore it, to delete the email and move on. But a part of me needed to face them, to lay bare the truth they'd ignored for so long. Anger coursed through me, but I didn't let it take over. I decided to meet them, not for their sake, but for mine. I needed to close this chapter, to say what I'd held back all those years. I wasn't the scared girl they dismissed anymore. I'd built a company, a home, a life without them. Facing them would be my way of proving that, not just to them, but to myself. I called Kenneth, my uncle who'd been my anchor since Chattanooga. I told him about my mom's call and my dad's email. He listened quietly, then said, "You've earned every bit of this. Don't let them take an inch." His words steadied me. He reminded me how I'd started with nothing, how I'd clawed my way up through late nights and setbacks. "Stand your ground," he urged. "You owe them nothing." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Kenneth's faith in me was like armor, giving me the strength to prepare for what was coming. I knew Tracy would be there, too. She was always the one pulling the strings, the one who turned my parents against me. Her name alone sparked a mix of fury and resolve. I could picture her walking into my mansion, her eyes scanning for something to claim, just like she'd claimed my app idea years ago. But this time, I wasn't defenseless. I spent the next few days preparing, mentally replaying what I'd say. I wrote down key points: how they'd chosen her over me, how I'd survived their betrayal, how I'd built everything despite them. I wasn't going to let them rewrite the past. By the time I hung up with Kenneth, my mind was set. This meeting wasn't about reconciliation. It was about standing up for the life I'd created. I didn't know exactly what they'd say or how they'd try to justify themselves, but I was ready. They'd see the woman I'd become, and they'd learn they had no place in my world anymore. A week later, a car pulled up outside my Portland mansion. My dad, my mom, and Tracy stepped out, their faces a mix of forced smiles and entitlement. They walked through the front door like they owned the place. My dad's eyes scanning the high ceilings, my mom clutching her purse, and Tracy trailing behind with a smug tilt to her chin. I stood in the foyer, Kenneth by my side, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. They didn't greet me, didn't ask how I was, they just launched into their agenda. My mom spoke first, her voice syrupy but sharp. "This house is stunning," she said, gesturing around. "But you owe us, you know. We raised you, gave you everything. It's only fair we share this." I clenched my fists. Her words slicing through me. Owe them? After they'd sided with Tracy and thrown me out, I shook my head, keeping my voice steady. "You gave me nothing but a suitcase and a deadline," I said. "This is mine." My mom's smile faltered, but she pressed on, insisting family meant splitting everything equally. I'd had enough. I stepped forward, looking straight at Tracy. "Let's talk about what you did," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "You stole my app idea, posted it online as your own, and then convinced them to kick me out because I was uncomfortable to have around." Tracy's face twisted, but I kept going. "You manipulated them, turned them against me, and they believed every lie." My dad shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to my mom, who looked away. Tracy opened her mouth, but I wasn't done. Before the meeting, my Aunt Cheryl had texted me screenshots from that online business group. They showed Tracy's posts claiming my app idea as hers and messages where she trashed me, calling me lazy and jealous to justify her actions. I held up my phone, showing the evidence to my parents. "Here's the truth," I said, scrolling through the messages. "She lied about me to strangers and you bought it without a second thought." My mom's face paled and my dad's jaw tightened, but they said nothing. The silence was deafening. Kenneth Snort stepped in, his voice calm but firm. "You've got no right to be here," he told them, his eyes locked on my dad. "She built this life without you. It's time for you to leave." His support grounded me, reminding me I wasn't alone. My dad tried to interrupt, mumbling about family loyalty, but Kenneth cut him off. "Loyalty? You chose Tracy over her," he said, pointing at me. "You don't get to walk in now and demand anything." Tracy finally spoke, her voice shrill. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said, tossing her hair. "I didn't steal anything. You were always dramatic, making things up to get attention." I stared at her, incredulous. Even now, with proof in my hands, she wouldn't admit it. I took a deep breath, my voice steady as steel. "You're not my family anymore," I said, looking at all three of them. "You lost that right when you threw me out. Get out of my house." Tracy's smirk vanished, and my parents exchanged uneasy glances, but I stood firm, pointing to the door. Days after the confrontation, Cheryl texted me from Memphis. Her message was brief but urgent. Tracy was spreading lies, telling everyone I was selfish for refusing to share my wealth with the family. She'd been talking to relatives, painting me as cold and ungrateful, claiming I'd turned my back on them for money. My stomach churned reading those words. Even after everything, Tracy was still twisting the narrative to make herself the victim. I wasn't surprised, but the sting of her betrayal cut deep. Cheryl called me that evening, her voice heavy with doubt. "I heard Tracy's side," she said, "but something doesn't add up. Tell me what really happened." I took a deep breath, grateful for her willingness to listen. I laid out the whole story, how Tracy stole my app idea years ago, posted it online as her own, and convinced my parents to kick me out when I called her out. I told Cheryl about the years of favoritism, how my mom and dad always took Tracy's side, and how they dismissed me without a second thought. Cheryl listened in silence, her occasional sighs telling me she was piecing it together. I sent her the screenshots she'd shared before, the ones from the online business group, where Tracy had claimed my work and smeared my name. "This isn't just about the house," I told her. "It's about years of lies and manipulation." Cheryl promised to get to the bottom of it. She sounded angry, not at me, but at the family she'd trusted to tell the truth. I hung up feeling lighter, like I'd finally handed the burden to someone who cared. Cheryl didn't waste time. She forwarded those screenshots to our extended family, along with a detailed message. explaining how Tracy had lied about me and how my parents had enabled her. She included Tracy's old posts where she'd called me lazy and jealous to justify stealing my idea. The evidence was undeniable. Relatives who'd once believed Tracy's stories started reaching out to Cheryl, shocked and apologetic. They shared her message, and soon the truth was circulating, exposing Tracy's deceit and my parents' complicity. My mom and dad tried to defend themselves, claiming they'd acted in the family's best interest, but their words fell flat against the proof. The fallout was swift. Family members turned their backs on Tracy, my mom, and my dad. Cousins unfollowed them on social media, aunts stopped inviting them to gatherings, and even close friends distanced themselves. My dad's reputation, once propped up by his charming stories, crumbled. My mom, who'd always leaned on her image as a nurturing parent, faced whispers of neglect. Tracy, the loudest of them all, became a pariah, her lies unraveling in front of everyone who'd once admired her. I didn't gloat, but I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing the truth had finally caught up with them. Then Heather texted me, her message a surprise. She'd heard from mutual friends in Memphis that Tracy had been badmouthing me to them years ago, long before the confrontation. She told everyone you were unstable, that you caused all the family drama, Heather wrote. I didn't know how bad it was back then. Her words added another layer to Tracy's betrayal, confirming she'd been working against me even in circles I thought were safe. I thanked Heather for letting me know, feeling a mix of anger and vindication. The truth was out, and it was reshaping everything. Months later, I stood in my Portland home, finally at peace. I had cut off all contact with my dad, my mom, and Tracy. Their numbers were blocked, their emails filtered to spam. I didn't hate them, but I no longer needed their presence in my life. The weight of their betrayal had lifted, replaced by a clarity that came from choosing myself. I didn't owe them explanations or second chances, not after everything they'd done. My focus turned to my new life in Portland. My company was thriving with new features for the app rolling out and a growing team that felt like family. I spent evenings networking with local entrepreneurs, building connections that were genuine, not tainted by past hurts. I joined a mentorship program guiding young coders who reminded me of my younger self, full of dreams but lacking support. Every step forward felt like a victory, not just for me, but for the person I'd fought to become. Kenneth became my rock, visiting me often from Chattanooga. Snorts, he'd show up with his warm laugh, bringing stories and advice that kept me grounded. "You've built something real," he told me during one visit, his eyes shining with pride. No one can take that away. His words stayed with me, a reminder that family isn't just blood, it's the people who show up when you need them most. We'd sit over coffee talking about my plans for the company or his latest adventures, and I felt a sense of belonging I'd never had with my parents. I heard through Cheryl about the fallout back in Memphis. Tracy was working a low-paying retail job, her social circle reduced to almost nothing. Her lies had caught up with her, and the relatives who once admired her now kept their distance. My mom and dad, struggling with debts they'd hidden for years, sold their house to stay afloat. They moved to a small apartment, living quietly, their reputations tarnished by the truth Cheryl had shared. I didn't wish them harm, but I felt no guilt either. Their choices had led them there, just as mine had led me to Portland. Looking back, I learned that self-respect and resilience matter more than blood ties. Family isn't defined by who shares your name, it's the people who respect you, who lift you up instead of tearing you down. I'd spent years chasing approval from those who'd never give it, but I'd found strength in walking away. Kenneth, Cheryl, and the friends I'd made in Portland were my true family, the ones who saw my worth when others didn't. That lesson shaped everything, how I ran my company, how I chose my relationships, how I lived my life. To everyone listening to my story, thank you for being here. I've shared this not just to recount what happened, but to show that you can rise above betrayal and build something extraordinary. What do you think about my journey? Have you faced similar challenges or found your own strength in tough times? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear them. Your stories matter, and they might just inspire someone else. The story ends here. Now, let's listen to some music to relax.